Okay, welcome to this live stream. In this one, I'm going to be continuing my work on this simplified skull. So I'm going to be working on the details. I'm going to go ahead and put it onto this stand, just a simple metal floor flange with a 1/2-inch metal pipe on a block of wood. That will just allow me to continue to work on the details without having to set it down, and it'll also be in the upright position so that I can make a mold of it as well. I'm live streaming here on YouTube, and so if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll also be uploading a higher quality version of this onto my Patreon, so if you're interested, you can find that over on my Patreon page, and those videos are very similar to this, where I'm just sculpting something and then kind of walking you through my process. So let's go ahead and get started with this. I'll go ahead and get this in place, and then I'll be able to reframe it. You can see I've put kind of a hole, or kept a hole open right here at the back of the skull, and that will just allow me to put that on here, and then I'll build some clay, and actually kind of a cone of clay around the bottom here. This hole is the foramen magnum, so it's just part of the skull, and I'll go ahead and clean that up once I'm ready to get to that area, and then I'll just be continuing to work on the symmetry all around and finalizing the details. I also might get a heat gun and warm the surface of the clay a little bit. We'll see if I get to that point today, but that's something else that I might do. So right now I'm just gonna go ahead and put this on right here, like that. So let me check my framing. Yeah, so basically what this does is it just allows me to work on the details without messing things up. I can have a clean sculpture. I don't have to be holding it or laying it on the table, and so I can kind of finish up the details without messing up some of the stuff that I've already worked on. You'll see that it's a little bit off center, so I didn't put it right in the middle. That's because this is where I'm going to pour. As I build the mold for this, I'm going to have a little cone here, and I'm going to pour the plaster into this area, and it'll fill the skull up this way. So I don't really want to have it right on the center line. I'll have it a little bit off center for that reason. And now I'm just going to go ahead and come in and build in just a little bit more clay around this area to make sure that it's got a pretty solid connection around that base, that it won't be wobbling around too much or fall off as I'm continuing to work on these details. Let's see, let me go. So again, if you have any questions, let me know if there's anything off. These are the same settings I used last time, but I had some issues with the audio last time. So if there's anything like that, please let me know, and if not, I'll just get right into this sculpture. So at this point, I'm getting pretty close to finishing, and let's see, what else do I have to work on? Well, I have to finish up kind of this inside area. That's a little bit harder to see, so I might change the angle of the camera as I work in there. But I have this inside area, just cleaning up the surface details on top, and that's pretty much it. So I'm getting pretty close to finishing this, and then I will start the mold making process. We'll see if I can record some of that. I use just some cheap silicone from the hardware store, and so it's pretty stinky, so I don't like to do it inside that much, but I might be able to do some of it indoors, or maybe I can do it outside. But now it's getting cold, so I don't know if I'll film that part of it. We'll see. Maybe if there's enough interest in seeing the mold making process. I know that's something that a lot of people are interested in, because obviously that's an important part of sculpting, so I understand that. But I just I guess I've kind of kept away from doing more on the mold making process just because I don't consider myself an expert. My molds are just good enough to get by, and they usually require some cleanup work afterwards. So that's why I haven't focused a ton of time on mold making tutorials and things like that. But there will be some mold making lessons in the figure course, the figure sculpting course over at proko.com/sculpture, as well as the portrait sculpting course. Just some simple mold making techniques that I'll go over. So I'm just taking little pieces of clay. This is kind of slow going because I'm working with this clay that's a little bit firmer, and I didn't warm it up ahead of time, so it is kind of slow building up this little funnel. Then once I have that, I'm going to grab some tools and continue to work on these details. But a lot of sculpting is just this. It's like, especially getting it to the, from an okay stage to like the wow stage where things are really coming together. It's just time, it's just investing hours into the sculpture. And that's how it is with a lot of things. Like to get something that's okay, or to build up your skills to where it's okay, you can do that in maybe a couple hundred hours. But then to build a skill until where you're like a master, or where you're better than 90% of people in that field, that just takes time and practice and instruction. So all of those things. But here we go, that's coming together. Okay, I think I'll leave it about right there. I'll grab some of my tools, work in the clay. And I'll go ahead and start just continue to work on some of these details. So I'll want to have some clay in my hand. That just keeps it warm, so I'm just going to cut up this piece of clay and keep some on hand, literally. That just keeps it warm. Okay, there we go. Let's see what I want to work on. So I have to be careful because this is a little bit off center. I don't want to lose track of the center line or anything like that. Let me reframe the camera so that we can see a little bit better what's going on. Okay. Make sure that it's basically in the right area. It's looking a little bit better. Okay. So I'm just going to come in here a little bit because I see that this is off. When you see something's off, just go ahead and fix it, because it's not going to... It's better to fix it right away and then to just leave it and be like, oh, I'll remember to come back and change that, because sometimes you don't remember. So I'm just going to change that right now. Coming in and carving away some of this. Because last time I talked about that I wanted this transition for the cheek to go right into this plane right here, to go right into this back area, to just kind of flow into one another. So that's what I'm going to be doing. That's going to take removing some of this material. And a lot of, you know, a lot of sculpting is just playing with different things, playing with different line work, especially this stylized type, which is kind of fun. I like stylized. It's interesting. Sometimes I think if you're really good at stylizing something, it can be almost more interesting than realistic, especially if it's realistic but it's not very well done realistic, so it's kind of amateur realistic. Then if you're able to do something stylized that's clean and that looks well done, it's almost better than realism that's just not quite there. Because most beginners they attempt realism, but you can just see right away, oh, this is a beginner, this doesn't look right, there's something that's off. But then as you gain experience and get a little bit better, you know, your work looks better. But if you're a beginner and you try to do something stylized and you can do it really clean, you can kind of get past well, I think it looks better than trying for realism. If you're just going for something that looks good. You know, I think realism is more impressive, definitely, and shows more skill. But doing something that's stylized can also be really interesting and really fun. And it does, you know, it does take some skill for sure. And patience. So I'm just looking at that. So it is kind of hard to see everything from when the head's on this angle. So I might switch things up in a little bit. Maybe I'll stand up and look at the head a little bit from above, change the angle of the camera as well. To work on because there's some things that I wanted to change on this upper part of the face, but for now I'm just going to work on this, turning this around, getting it to a point where I like it. Awesome. Are you sculpting a skull of a face? If that question is if this is a particular person, no, it's just like based on this skull, this little skull I got on eBay. So this one was like under $20, so not too expensive, and I really like it as a reference. And so when I got that, I was just so that's basically what this is based off of, is this plastic skull reference. I don't know what the process was for getting for this, if it's a 3D scan of a skull or an actual, you know, they molded it and cast it, or what they did for that one, but it's a skull that I thought was handsome and interesting, and so that's one of my favorite skull references to use. And then I did this, like this was for the figure sculpting course, or the portrait sculpting course, so I did a realistic version of it. And then after I had a realistic version of this skull in clay, and I was like, well, I'll just simplify it and abstract it a little bit, because that's a fun thing to do, especially with skulls. They're really interesting. So I thought this stylized version that's a little bit more abstract would be a fun project, and I like how it's coming along. So good afternoon. I'm a fan from Brazil. Very cool. Hello, Brazil. I'm always I mention this almost every live stream, but I'm always impressed that so many people from around the world are able to participate through technology, you know, and watch these videos. I mean, it's just something that you couldn't even conceive of 100 years ago. It's just you wouldn't even think that is in the realm of possible things that could happen, that you'd be able to, for relatively low cost, be able to watch somebody around the world and have it instantly you know, and be able to comment with that person, have it instantly show up on a device that everybody carries around. You know, it's just incredible. So I'm always grateful for technology, the people that make this stuff work, because I'm not particularly technologically savvy, so it's especially impressive. Okay. Let's see. So let me check the. I'm actually going to use these calipers and just check some of the distances on either side, just to see how I'm doing. So there's that there. And that's looking about right. Might need to come down a little bit more on this side. And I'm also gonna just come in and make that edge a little bit more apparent over here. And then work on smoothing out this texture. Just taking a little piece of clay and dragging it across the surface to try to smooth that out. Okay, let's see. Well, you guys still can't see under here very well. Let me move this camera angle down a little bit. Because I want to clean up this inside area. That's one of the areas that was hard to work on when it was just kind of when I was doing it without a base, when it wasn't on any base, because it's hard to clean up this area without messing up the other areas when I set it down. So let's just take in little pieces of clay. Actually, for this area I mostly need to remove some clay first. So let me work on that. And this is a little homemade tool that works pretty well. It's just the tip of a, well, it's a pan, and then I epoxied the tip of part of a paper clamp onto it. So just stuff that I got from the dollar store. Really cheap way to make tools, and they work pretty well. They're not as, if you want something a little bit nicer, you could do like metal, like copper pipe or a copper straw or something, or a metal straw that they have for like reusable straws. I've seen those, and those could make good sculpting tools. I think I saw some of those at Walmart at some point. But basically I'm just going in, carving out these areas. I see a piece of paper, so this skull is on top of just crumpled up paper. So sometimes that's so because this is, somebody asked how heavy is the skull, because it's, well, let me see, it's maybe 5 pounds, between 5, maybe 8 pounds. So what is that in kilograms? I'm not sure, but it's not too heavy because it is filled with paper. If it was solid clay, it'd be a lot heavier. It'd be maybe 15 or 20 pounds of clay. but because it's mostly hollow, it's not too heavy. That's also why I was able to kind of stick it onto this base and it's not moving around too much, because it's not that heavy. But just in case, I'm going to come around the base and kind of press the clay in, make sure that it's a firm attachment. So 5 to 8 pounds, that's like 3 to 4 kilograms. Yeah, that sounds right. I guess I should be listening to something. Maybe I could put something on. There's not a lot of explaining to do at this point because I'm really just trying to clean things up, working on the line work, but it's not something that requires a lot of explanation, but it just requires a lot of time investment. Maybe I should put on some music or something, but I'm not sure how that works with copyright and stuff. I'll have to learn more about this whole live stream thing and the rules around it. But I would like to do more. I enjoy doing live streams, and I like to build up my YouTube. I've been trying to do that, but it does require a lot of time and just figuring out what people are interested in. That's something that I'm trying to kind of experiment now with different types of videos. So if you guys have thoughts on things that might be productive, somebody says, what about talking about how and who you learn from? Yeah, I can talk about that. So I've always been interested in art. So, but then I went to college for pre-physical therapy. I thought I was going to be a physical therapist because somebody suggested, oh, I think you'd be good at that. You like helping people, and so you'd be good at this, and it pays pretty well. So that was kind of what I was going in for. And then I took a sculpting class. Just because I saw there was somebody's sculpture. He was a sculptor who's actually a friend and his name's Jason Millward. And I saw one of his sculptures and I was just really impressed. And I was like, man, whatever class that was, I want to take that class. So I took the class, and the instructor wasn't that interested in realism, but I really liked the class. And then I eventually decided, you know what, I just love sculpting so much. I love art so much. I just have to try to make this work as a career. But it's tricky. Like when people say that it's difficult to make a living as an artist, that is true. It's true. It's difficult. But I think that's true with any creative field. If you want to be, a musician or an actor or anything that's creative, that's something that's going to be very difficult because so many people want to be in that field. And the same thing with now with content creators and things that are also, that's also a creative industry. So it is difficult to make money doing that. But I decided then that I was going to try to make it work. And I guess that's still what I'm trying to do. So I basically switched my major over to sculpture and starting taking a bunch of sculpting classes. Well, before that, I didn't switch over my major for a while. I would just take whatever art classes I wanted, um, whatever ones that would interest me. So I took a lot of the advanced classes first before, and then I had to go back and take like the beginner classes just because they were like, oh, this isn't your major, so you don't really have to take the beginner stuff first. You can just jump into, figure sculpting, or you can jump into these other more advanced classes. But then I was like, oh, actually, I did decide to change my major, so then I had to go back through and do all the beginner stuff. And mostly the instructor there at where I studied, which was Utah State University, was mostly interested in abstraction. So he's an abstract sculptor. And he's but he was very good at abstraction. So he would stylize the figure in a way that was very interesting. The artist is Kiyosaki Robert. No, now his name's escaping me. That's embarrassing. Is it Robert Kiyosaki? Oh my goodness. I cannot remember his name. Anyway, I'll remember, and then I'm terrible with names, but I shouldn't remember it because it's like I should remember it. Anyway, he's a Japanese artist and does really beautiful stylized work, and even some figures that are represented in a stylized way, in an abstracted way. So he's just really, I'm gonna move this over just a little bit. He's just really talented. And so basically what I did was I took his stylization and then I would apply it to the figure because I'm interested in the figure. That's what I like sculpting. So that gave me the chance to basically take what I was learning from him, that stylized thing, and then apply it to something I was interested in. And there was other sculptors that I also found inspiration from. Jason Millward, I've talked about him. There was Miles Howell. I forget his last name. Man, I'm on the spot, so maybe that's why I can't remember names. Whenever I'm put on the spot, that's when I start to forget names. But just a bunch of abstract sculptors were who I learned from. Then when I decided I wanted to, learn more realism, basically teach myself how to sculpt realistically, that I mostly learned on my own and from other sculptors. So the most of the actual, learning of anatomy and those types of things, that just came from me studying those things after, because I actually didn't learn a lot of that in school. Proco was a big thing. Like before I was working with Proco, I would just watch all of their free content. I couldn't afford the courses because I was poor and going to college. Well, and college, I was so poor that I was able to get grants, and so it was very inexpensive for me, even though it was a couple $1,000s per semester. But for me, it was not that much because I was well, for one thing, because it was a local school. So because it was in the state where I grew up, I was able to get, in-state tuition, which is a lot cheaper. And then on top of that, I was able to get a lot of grants and things. So I didn't go into debt, or I paid off all of my school debt before I graduated. And so if you can't go to school, I think if you can't go to college without with if you have to take out loans to go to college, I'd say like just work, and wait until you can just pay for it outright, because I don't think at this point college is worth going into debt for, because like I said, most of the stuff I learned was outside of college, from either from artists or just looking it up online, those types of things. So I learn as much as you can. Learn as much as you can just on your own, with stuff like this, stuff like other YouTube videos that just walk you through tutorials and things like that. It does take a time investment, a larger time investment, especially if you're not purchasing like an online course where it condenses everything into like a course. That's one of the reasons that I built the figure sculpting course. Was I was like, well, I just want, like, if I was to do it over again, like, this is all the information that I wish I had right at the beginning. And so that's kind of that was my thought process when I was considering what to include in the figure sculpting fundamentals course. And so let's see, then while I was going to college, I would sign up for, like, I went to it's called Marble. It's stone carving symposium, marbles, and it's in Marble, Colorado, a town called Marble. And you basically go there for a week and you carve stone from a quarry that's like from a local quarry there. And that was a really great experience. So if you can't afford to go to college, or if you're thinking about going to college, I would look for some workshops like this where you can go directly to learn from somebody that you or learn from artists, or a specific artist that you're interested in. And that might cost a couple $1,000s, but you'd learn as much as a semester of college, and a semester of college is typically a lot more than that. And then you're not always guaranteed to have teachers that are actually experts in their field. So if you're going and following a specific artist and then doing a workshop from them, you're much more likely to get just some better advice and some better training than if you just go to a random college. Though I haven't had a lot of experience with ateliers, but those also can be pretty good if they're well put together. But then those are also very, very expensive. So then after I graduated, I was already working on the figure sculpting course for Proco. I'd reached out to him, and that was really a cool experience, because I figured, you know what, I'd done a sculpture of a hand that I thought was pretty impressive. And then I was like, oh, it would be so cool if Proco had some sculpting stuff. So I reached out and said, hey, would you be interested in some sculpting courses that I can teach? This is a sculpture I recently did. And so then I set up a call with Stan Prokopenko, who is the CEO. He created Proco, the Proco YouTube channel, and Proco, the company. And we talked a little bit, and he liked the idea. And so we started working on it. But when I contacted him, I still had I still had a year and a half left of college or something like that. So I was working on the courses while I was finishing up college. And then once I finished college, I was able to dedicate more time to working on the courses, but they were a lot of work up front. But I learned more from making those online courses than anything I learned in college. And I think that's just because when you're teaching something, you just learn more about it. You have to really dive into the topic. So it was really a good experience for me to be able to dive into figure sculpting and see, like, how did people used to sculpt? Like, how did the masters used to break things down, and how can I do that now in in an online course that will be really beneficial to people. So that's where I learned probably the most. Same thing with the figure sculpting course that I'm going through right now. Being able to sculpt the skull and other things, and doing these assignment demos where I'm sculpting something and then explaining the process to students. That's been really, really beneficial as an artist. But I consider myself just as much a teacher, I think, as an artist. I really enjoy teaching. I'd like to do some of those in-person workshops eventually, but right now I'm kind of between studios, so I'm actually just in our little apartment right now, so there's not a lot of space, but eventually I'd like to get a studio space where I could invite people over, and they could come from all over the country or all over the world and just take a week and learn, sculpting, where we would hire a model and do a sculpture and then have something that they could take home. That's still something that I'm really interested in. So that was kind of my journey, is just always being interested in art, and then deciding, I'm just going to try to make it work. But it is, like, if you think, there are a lot of easier ways to make money, especially, just going working for a company that's already successful and doing something like that. That's a lot easier of a way to have a reliable source of income. But if you can, I think if you're an artist, it's like you're miserable if you're not creating art, if you're not doing something creative, if you're a creative person in general. And I think people don't understand that aren't really creative. Some people say everybody's creative, but I don't really believe that that's true, because there are people that are just miserable if they're not creating art, if they're not sculpting or painting or whatever. So that's kind of what I think, that if I wasn't doing something creative, I'd just be miserable, and that would mean that my family would probably be miserable. And so I just wanted to, even though it is difficult and it has required a lot of work just to build our income to where we're barely getting by at this point, I feel like I've built the tools to eventually have it scale and go bigger and be a serious source of income in the future. But it is tricky. So about sculptures, can you make one that's posable? I've thought about that, yeah, and I actually have. I've made a prototype of a sculpture that it's just basically like the stop motion puppets that you see, and I made it out of materials that I got from the dollar store. So it was just like little wood popsicle sticks and wood dowels and a couple of wood beads, and then with that I made like little joints and everything and carved it out of wood. And I was thinking that actually that would be a fun YouTube video, but the one that I made was destroyed. I don't remember how it was destroyed, but basically it was just made out of wood popsicle sticks and some rubber bands to keep the joints together and stuff. But it was really fun making, so maybe I'll do another one of those. And then I would like to do something like that, but with metal. I'd like to do something that like casts this, so maybe cast one of these in cement, and then do something similar with the rib cage and the pelvis, and make almost like a posable skeleton, or maybe I just choose the pose ahead of time. But that's something that would be really fun. But I do like that idea of doing something that's posable, and something that's larger. I think would be really, really fun. Sculpture. But right now my main focus is just the portrait sculpting course. That's what's taken up most of my time. And it's not even most of the time sculpting, it's most of the time is just editing the videos, because I'm editing this course myself. So it really does take quite a bit of time to do all that. That's what I do most days, is just editing. and I'm trying to produce like one high quality video per week for the course, and so that requires quite a bit of time, especially if there's a lot of visuals and things like that. And if you go to the Proco 3D YouTube channel, you can see what those videos are like. All of the portrait sculpting lessons are the ones that I've edited, and then the figure sculpting are edited by Stan's team, so the team over at Proco.com. But it's good. It's a good skill to have. So I like. It's also something that's kind of creative, video editing, and being able to time things with my own sense of humor and my own style is kind of a fun adventure to learn and to be able to put together content, and so that's something that hopefully once I finish the portrait sculpting course, I'll be able to have more time to do more detailed videos for my YouTube channel and other things like that. And I'll probably continue to create courses because I see myself not just as a sculptor, but just as a teacher. I really like teaching. I like instructing, and I feel like the skills that I've built as I've been doing the sculpting course would easily transfer over to a course that's maybe more applicable to a wider audience. Maybe something like personal finances, everything you should know about building wealth and managing your money. That's a course that I think I could do a fairly good version of it, because that's a topic that I'm interested in, and it's something that I think so many people could use and would really benefit from, and it's something that maybe I could price at a little bit higher range, and then the market for it is just a lot larger. So that could be something that could bring in some serious income if I could do it right. So those are the types of projects that I'm also interested in, other than just sculpting. But that's for once I finish the portrait sculpting course. Let's see. Let me see how we're doing on everything. Okay. So right now, just like I've been doing, I'm just going through, taking little pieces of clay and cleaning up the line work. It just takes time to clean up this kind of stuff. Let me see. So I'm going to come in and just make sure that the line work isn't getting lost, or the symmetry isn't getting lost. I feel like on this side it's getting lost a little bit. So I want to make sure that I'm not losing any symmetry. So a center line is really helpful there. And I'm actually going to stand up and just because I feel like I can see things a little bit better from standing up. Let me move this. Okay, yeah, I can see things a little bit better from here and get a little bit closer. Make sure I'm not in the way. Though this is not a very flattering angle for the camera, but oh, whoops. Moving things. Okay. So I'm just taking clay, dragging it across the surface, trying to remove some of these marks, coming at it from different angles. Basically just trying to smooth out the texture. And that line work. So about when I was reaching out to Stan, I just, I wasn't in any position, like I'd never taught before. I didn't really have that much of an artistic portfolio, but I was willing to reach out and just see, like, hey, are you interested in this? And he was. And so I think there's a lot of opportunities that people are missing out on, that you don't know you might be missing out on, but all it takes is just reaching out to somebody and asking for an opportunity. And most of the opportunities that you look for, most of them won't work out, but if one of them does, all it takes is one. All it takes is one thing to go big and become really successful, to basically jumpstart your career or jumpstart your financial, journey, or being able to build your name as an artist. And then once you have that first thing, it's so much easier to open some doors for the second thing and the third thing and things after that, because then you have something to your name. You can show people, this is what I've done in the past, this is what I can do for you. And then as you become more and more successful, it just kind of snowballs. But if you don't ever, take that chance on the first thing, you can never have that snowball effect, and then you can't start, doing those important things for artists, like building a name for yourself, building a portfolio. Like, you have to be doing something if you want to find success. So I would recommend definitely trying to think about where you'd like to be and who are the people that you would need to be around or need to be in connection with, and then just study those people or that industry, and really try to get that first thing. Like, be willing to be rejected hundreds of times or thousands of times. If you sent out, 10, if you sent out your portfolio to, let's say, 10 galleries, let's say you wanted to be in galleries, and so you sent out your portfolio to 10 galleries a day, and then you just reached out to them and said, hey, I'm doing an article on what galleries are looking for in artists, and so would you be willing to do an interview over email, or would you be willing to do a Skype interview or something like that, so that you can say, like, this is what I'm looking for in an artist, and this is what I'm looking for in an artist's portfolio. And if you were to reach out to several galleries and do that, then you would be able to get in contact with people that are in the industry, and that could work with any industry. And then you have these people's contact information, and you've already kind of opened the door. And then if you were to take that article or something and make a YouTube video about it, or make some short videos that just kind of explain, these are the top 10 things that galleries are looking for when it comes to artists. Or if you were able to reach out directly to artists and ask, like, what's your primary source of income, and how long did it take you to build that income, and then you did an article just on artists and things like that. Like, that type of initiative to just go out and do stuff that is interesting and that helps people, that's what the world is looking for right now. The content creators and people that can create and do things that are interesting. That's what a lot of people are hungry for. A lot of businesses, if you can do something creative, and how to, let's say, edit together a video that looks nice, or do something that brings attention to whatever you're working on, and you can show that that's a skill that you have, then there's so many people that are hungry, that are willing to pay for that skill, and so many people online that you can reach nowadays. Wherever you are in the world, you have that potential to reach them, and you can make a a living doing that if you're serious about it. There's very few places that are so disconnected from the world that you couldn't make a living, online. Most successful businesses and people and artists and companies and stuff, they usually come from the US. I don't know if that is, it's kind of a chicken and egg situation where I don't know if it's the regulations of the US or if it's just the spirit of encouraging people to believe that you could do something that's big, that basically you could create something unique that causes so many people in the US to do well, and even people that come from outside the US and then immigrate to the US, they also do very well depending on where they come from. So I think just encouraging that spirit of creativity in yourself and saying, you know what, there are people in the world that would be interested in the type of stuff that I'm producing, and so I can build something that would interest those people. And it might take me a little while. I might have to invest some time and energy into it, but it's definitely possible for me to create something that is worthwhile to a lot of people. And there's so many people that have done just that from all around the world. And so I think hopefully what the U.S. is doing with its influence is spreading that spirit of creativity and entrepreneurship and possibility with the rest of the world, as well as principle, or as well as policy type things like free market principles, and basically being able to own what you create. And that's a really important thing too, because if you live in a place where everything you create is taken and then redistributed by the government, then it's a very frustrating situation. You basically have very little chance of building something on your own, just because there's no motivation to. It's just all taken away as soon as you build it. So it does, I think, to a degree, depend on where you're living and the policies that the culture has encouraged. But right now, the U.S. is not that free when it comes to economic policy. I mean, we have taxes and things that are a lot higher than a lot of other places in the world. I think the reason that we're still the number one creator of these big companies and big celebrities and things like that is really just the attitude of, I can do something big and nobody's going to stop me, basically. And if you have that attitude and you work at it, then you don't have to be living in the U.S. to benefit from that spirit of creativity and be able to build something big. And the thing is, a lot of people think that there's like a set pie. Like if you make more money, then somebody else had to have lost money, because they think that there's like a set amount of money. But that's not true. There's not a set amount of money, and there's not a set amount of value. Money is created from nothing. Like, just think about just the paper that we print money on. That paper was just paper, but what created the value? Like, the value was created by that paper representing something, representing food, or representing shelter, or representing materials to build something. That's what that paper represents. It represents a promise that you'll be able to exchange this in the future and get something back that was more or less equal to the value that you exerted when you earned the money. And so the example that I like to give is when sculpting. If I took a block of stone and then I bought it from a stone quarry, and they sell it for $50. Let's say they sell a 100-pound block of stone for $50, and I purchase that. Who lost money in that transaction? Like, people might say, well, you lost money, but I didn't really lose money because I got a piece of stone. Let's say it's a beautiful piece of stone that I know is worth more, that I can make worth more than the money that I spent on it. So then let's say I invested a couple, maybe 100 hours on sculpting it into something, and then I list that stone, or I put that stone into a gallery. I put that stone into a gallery, and then let's say that they take 50%, and I take 50%, and we sell it for $2,000. So then that stone that I paid $50 for was basically, it had a value, but then by exerting effort on it and creating something that was beautiful and interesting, I increased the value of the stone. And then when the gallery sold it, let's say they sold it for $2,000, who became poorer? Like in this whole thing, who's becoming poorer? Who is losing money by me creating something beautiful out of stone? The quarry didn't lose money. I didn't lose money, even though I bought the stone, because I actually gained money once I added value to it and then sold it. The gallery didn't lose money because they got 50%. I didn't lose money from what the gallery took because maybe I didn't want to sell it on my own. Maybe I didn't have the skills to sell it. So I didn't lose money. I gained, the $1,000 that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And so you can see that this is how money works. You're just able to create things and exert effort in a way that people find valuable to them. And if you can do that, then you can create value. There's a book that's called The Richest Man in Babylon, and that's a great book. I recommend all artists read that. I recommend everybody read it, but especially artists, because I feel like in the art field, just like I was complaining kind of about money earlier, so maybe I have some of this that I still need to I need to change my perspective as well, and that's certainly the case. But this book basically lays out that when you create value, everybody gets richer. When you create value for other people, everybody benefits. There's not a loser. When value is destroyed, when you destroy something, that's when value is gone. Let's say you burn down a house or something like that. That house, the value of that house is then destroyed. But when you're building something, when you're creating something, whether it's a sculpture or a house or a business or a product, that's only beneficial for everybody involved if it's something that people are actually looking for. So somebody says owning what you create should be a given right everywhere. Yeah, that's what I think, is that it's basically private property rights. So when you talk about people talk about it as the, what do they call it? They call it capitalism, but almost in a derogatory way. But all capitalism means is mutually beneficial voluntary exchange. So if you purchase something with the money that you earned and it's something that you want and you purchase it, that is capitalism. So people say that capitalism is so bad, but it's just free trade. It's just being able to spend your own money. Every other system is basically the government or somebody more powerful than you deciding how to spend your money. So that's why, the push for socialism or communism, I'm against all those, because it's basically you do the work. So let's say you create the sculpture, and then the government says, well, you have to sell it for this price, and you have to and then we get to decide how that money is spent after you sell it. So that's the thing that nobody talks about when they're selling socialism, is that, oh, you do the work, we in the government get to decide how the money is spent or how the resources are reallocated. And so it never works out. It's always better to just receive the fruits of your own labor. That is just the case. So somebody says, really, I thought money represents how much a county owns, like a natural resource, and the people that live in the country, if the country has gold, oil, farmland, and educated people, its money is valuable. So basically, money is just a promise. It's just a promise that you will be able to trade this later for something that is around equal value. So if a country, so what happens when a country's currency becomes basically worthless? So things like Zimbabwe, that's like a classic case where basically the money became worthless and it wasn't even worth the paper it was printed on. And what's the cause of that is just the government printing more and more money, and then people not creating more and more products and services to sell. So if the government just basically the governments are usually the only ones that are able to legally print money, and so when you do that, you inflate the money. You basically increase the amount of money. That's why there's inflation all over the world, is because people encourage people to stay home and not produce products and services that can be sold. And then a lot of governments sent people money to stay home. So there was two parts of it. There was the printing of money, and then there was the paying people to not produce goods and services, and that's why money became worth less than it was before, by a considerable amount, because it was just perverse incentives to say, stay home, don't do anything, don't create anything, and we'll pay you to stay home. And people did this all over the world, and that's why the value of almost every currency dropped, was because people were staying home, they weren't producing new stuff, and then they were still consuming. They were still buying things because the government was, especially in the U.S., this is especially the case, the government was basically sending out money and but not requiring that people create anything of value for other people, and that just drops the value of money. So money is what the best money is something that you can't print, so things like gold and silver, but we've gotten away from those types of money. And the reason that I think that those are the best is because they're a scarce resource and you can't just print it. So that's why for a long time that was currency. And I think if the US dollar collapses, I think we'll have to go back to something approximating that. But when the currency of a government starts to collapse, they have to make gold and silver illegal, and that's actually happened in the US before. So it is interesting. Yeah, money and stuff, I'm interested. I like all that. So somebody says, I say money is only valuable when it's backed up by a product and work, by products and work. And that is exactly right. Money is a promise. It's like, in the future, you'll be able to get something out of this. And when governments, or you'll be able to get, let's say it's $5. In the future, you'll be able to get $5 worth of stuff out of this. And when the government just prints money, they steal the purchasing power. So that's what they're doing. They're taking away the purchasing power of the money. So it's basically it's like an invisible tax, where they take away the value of the money because they flood the market with money, and then pretty soon you can't get $5 worth of stuff. You can only get $4 worth of stuff for the same $5. So if you have, let's say you have $10,000 in your bank account, but then all of a sudden everything becomes 5 times more expensive, that $10,000 isn't worth what it was. So therefore it's just a dishonest way of taxing people, is what inflation is. So all inflation is that. So whoever is printing the money, you could say some inflation comes from counterfeit, but for the most part, government printing money is just legalized counterfeit. They're just making more money without actually creating any more value or products or services for the market. So that's why these governments should be reined in on their ability to just print money, and then because it's basically stealing. So basically you should only be able to as a government, you should only be able to spend what you take from taxes, because taxes is an honest way to get money. Inflation is a dishonest way to get money as a government. So we should require that governments at least be honest in when they're taking your money, because inflation is just, oh, we need a couple $1 billion, we'll just print it with a printing press, but they haven't created any value, so they just steal that value from the market and from the value of the currency. So that's kind of, I guess, a tangent, but something that I'm interested in. That's what I'm trying to get into a series called Creating Conjecture, and I'll probably film another one of these tomorrow, where I just talk about, current events and other things. And I don't know if that's gonna go anywhere, but it's kind of fun, and I like talking about different things. I feel like we need to have more open dialogue, and people should be able to discuss ideas and talk about, policies and things openly, and promote whatever ideas you think are right and accurate. And if you're wrong, then let's debate it and get it corrected. But that's something that I'm interested in doing more of. Okay, let's see. So, you can see that it's a slow process. Things aren't changing super fast. It's not, you're not seeing big changes in the sculpture. Let me grab a stool so I can see a little bit better. So there's not a lot of big changes happening. It's just cleaning things up. This is the part that's not really that fun, but it's important if you're going to get it to a point where it's ready to mold and cast. And sometimes just the time that you take to take it from a design to that finished stage, that can make all the difference in the value of it once you're ready to sell it. I think I will mold this and cast it and then sell it like I've done with some other sculpture designs. If art was easy to make, would it be worth less? I don't know. It's hard to say, because there's a lot of people that their art process is fairly easy, or maybe it's more like hired out, but they're able to charge a lot more. So the price of art is complicated. So it's not as simple as well, I think just like money and things. And that's not very simple either, because a lot of people misunderstand how money works. And so it's obviously not super easy to understand. But the value of art is even more difficult, because it is fairly subjective. So it's hard for me to say, because I know that there are people who spend less time and energy on their artwork and sell it for more than what I'm currently, selling my artwork for. So it's not just the amount of work that you put into it. That's not what makes the art valuable. It's also, it's a collective perceived value of something. So it's also maybe your name, maybe how many works you've done in the past, how much your work has sold for in the past, what the art is representing, what the message behind the artwork is, and whether it's a message that people that have the money to spend on artwork believe in, or whether it's a message that they disagree with and so they're not willing to buy your particular work of art. These are all things that are factors in what the price of a work of art is, and basically the price of anything is what somebody's willing to pay for it. And so you can say, like, I could say that I'm gonna cast this in plaster and I'm gonna sell it for, $10,000 each, and I can say that that's the value of the art product. But unless somebody is willing to pay that $10,000, it's not actually worth that until somebody pays that much for it. So that's something that is difficult to quantify. It's difficult to figure out, and I think that's why the art market has been so taken advantage of by people who have kind of there's a lot of people that use the art market as a way to, even like mob bosses and stuff that use it to launder money or things like that, where they would say, I'm selling this painting that I just did in 2 minutes, and I'm selling it for $500,000, but it's really just a way of transferring money without, in a way that's legal and that appears above board, but it's actually for something else. So that type of stuff is complicated. That's probably a tiny fraction of the issue. I think most, especially most modern art and stuff, the reason that it goes for so much is because it's pushing a message that people that the galleries and museums and the people that are in the art industry agree with. And when they see, this work of art pushes this message that I agree with, they're willing to promote that art more and push it to the people that buy art. And then a lot of people that buy art also agree with those messages. So art is just a form of communication. As far as how it's priced and why, it's something that I'm still learning about. Maybe if I figure it out, I can charge 10 times what I charge for my artwork, and increase the value. I've heard the artist that I learned from, Robert Kiyosaki, that's who it is, Robert Kiyosaki. So that he recommends that you raise your prices about 10% per year when you're producing artwork as an artist. That's just what he recommends. But that's the price you can put on your artwork. Whether it sells or not is another issue. So it is kind of tricky, and it's something I'm not positive on what's the best way to price your artwork. It is a tricky question. And it also depends on when, the climate and things like that. Yeah. Okay, well, I think I'm about to wrap up this video. I've been able to get some more of the detail works done. What I'm probably going to do pretty soon is use a heat gun and just melt the entire surface of this sculpture a little bit. And what that does is it makes it a little bit firmer, so when I'm grabbing it and moving things, I'm less likely to mess up the texture that I've already done. I'm also probably going to smooth out this. I don't know if you can see very well, but there's a sharp transition here in the nose area. I think I'm going to smooth that out a little bit. If you can see there. So right now it's just a sharp transition, but I think I want that to be a little bit smoother. So those are some of the things that I'll be working on next. But it's just slow going, so that's why I wanted to do a live stream. You guys can see the process, and we could talk about it. If you're interested in sculpture, the links are in the description. There's a bunch of ways that you can learn a little bit more about sculpting. If you are interested, you can follow me on Instagram and Patreon. That's always appreciated. If you purchase any of the courses, that's always really appreciated. I'm just an artist trying to make his way in the world and provide value to people interested in sculpture. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll see you around in the next one.